Hello there, this is ETV Special Edition and I'm Sandayot Amrat with this edition. With this edition, I'll try to discuss on the 2023 African Economic Outlook and also the implementation of the Agenda 2063, how the economic outlook may affect the implementation of Agenda 2063 and SDG goals, as well as the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area. And to give us more on this, I'm joined here by Nashiru Abdullahi, who is Minister Counselor for the Ghana's permanent mission to the African Union and the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, as well as economic advisor to the ambassador of Ghana here in Ethiopia. Thank you so much for joining me and do stay with us. A very warm welcome to you, Nashiru Abdullahi.
Thank you so much, my brother. I'm very happy to be with you this afternoon.
Thank you so much. And as I told you earlier, we have to talk today on the economic outlook 2023 of Africa. So how would you explain the 2023 economic outlook of Africa?
Well, before we go into the explanation of the economic outlook of Africa for 2023, we need to have behind us how far we have come from 2020 to 2023. If you look at we were affected by the COVID crisis in 2019, 2020. And when we guessed about coming out of the COVID, this Ukraine-Russia crisis also came in. And most of these things have impacted our economic outlook. What we envisaged for Africa before 2020 was the brighter Africa with growth, high growth. But the pandemic and then the crisis have affected our growth expectations and aspirations. So I think by 2023 we are moving. Africa, most of the economies are coming up quickly from the crisis, and we believe that by the end of 2023, going to 2024, Africa will be stronger.
The 2023 outlook just forecasts it will decline by some percentage, and doesn't this significantly affect the Sustainable Development Goals or the implementation of Agenda 2063?
And I think, yes, one of the reasons why the focus for 2023 declined was, as I mentioned earlier, was the fact that the COVID-19 crisis affected most of our economies. Trade was halted, travels, tourism, a lot of activities halted in most countries. And if you look at the African continent as a whole, we have most of our countries that depend solely on Russia or Ukraine for food and other economic products. And so definitely it affected us. A number of African businesses have lost their trade because they could not operate during the COVID. And some of them who were exporting and importing from Europe and Russia have also been affected. So it has gone a long way into affecting not only the economies, but even human lives. But like I mentioned, we are positive that going forward from 2023, a lot of measures have been put in place to ensure that Africa is sustainable. And so we will move there.
Let's talk about just the implementation of Agenda 2063 and what is your take on that?
Okay, so the Agenda 2063, if you look at the 2063 agenda, it was carved around 2003. That we envisage in the next 50 or 60 years, Africa will have some common positions, particularly on development, on helping women and youth, on a lot of interventions. And so we crafted the Agenda 2063 based on 10-year development plans. The first 10-year development plan was 2013 to 2023. So our first 10 years development plan is actually ending in 2023. We are preparing to develop aspirations and programs for 2024 to 2033. And I think this time around we are focusing more on economic advancement and acceleration of the continent, particularly helping the citizens and our economies to stand. effectively. So that's what we have for the Agenda 2063. And we have some of the flagship projects that have been achieved. For instance, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is already operationalized. We have the African Space Agency and all those things that we are also working to ensure that even if we have not operationalized them, we will kickstart their operations from this year onwards. Yes.
So that's a nice point you have just mentioned, but there are just a lot of arguments that Agenda 2063 has lagged behind the time frame set, and that is because of just a number of factors, in fact. Can you just mention some ways, at least some 2 or 3 ways, the continent's leaders and the African Union should do in order to accelerate the implementation?
Well, if you look at when we were developing the first 10 years development programs for the Agenda 2063, what we failed to do was to cost the elements. For instance, we could not cost or budget how much will it cost us to implement AFCFTA, how much will it cost us to have a high-speed network, how much will it cost us to do the Grand Inga Dam. That was a lapse that we couldn't. So because there were no budgetary items associated to those things, it was difficult for member states particularly to agree as to what do we really need to bring on board for the union to move on. If you look at the union's budget, we've been operating on less than $250 million since 2016. And some of these projects, they need more money than $250 million. Are African leaders willing to expand their budgets? If we are willing to expand the budgets and looking at the aspirations and the flagship projects, then we will be living with a budget not below $1 billion in order to implement and to fast-track the Agenda 2063. But that notwithstanding, some of the policies are being implemented. If you look at some interventions, particularly on electricity, access to electricity, on movement of people, on the ratification of the AFCFTA, I think there has been progress on that. We can't say we are lagging behind.
Okay, now let's move on to the African Continental Free Trade Area. And Abdoulaye, what impression does it give you when you hear about the African Continental Free Trade Area?
The AFCFTA is one of the biggest achievements for Africa. If you look at since the organization of the African Union, the Organization of African Union to the African Union, ratification of instrument has been a challenge for member states. We've had some institutions that we've been established since 2000 and we are not getting ratification. But on the AFCFTA, between 2019 and this year, we've gotten 44 ratifications. This is the biggest achievement in the Union. To have 44 ratifications and 54 signatures on a single protocol is one of the biggest achievements. And thankfully, Ghana is hosting the AFCFTA. And if you can look at Ghana's intervention in the African Union, definitely will play the key role in establishing of this union. And so we believe that all the organs must get the best of services from the host and the governments of Africa to make sure that they kickstart. So the AFCFTA is one of our achievements, and the government of Ghana is particularly happy that we are moving very faster with the Continental Free Trade Area Agreement.
What practices have you just made to contribute to the successful attainment of the implementation of the Continental Free Trade Area?
Yes. So when we won the bid to host the African Continental Free Trade Area in 2018-2019, our first proposal to be sure that member states would join was that the government of Ghana committed $10 million to support the African Continental Free Trade Area. And aside the commitment of the $10 million, we provided them with the state-of-the-art facilities to operate. And we've supported them with staff. Even before the African Union recruited staff, we seconded staff to the Secretariat in Accra. And we've also tried to interact with our partners, with other member states, to ensure that they ratify quickly. And that is why you have seen that between 2020 and 2023, we've gotten addition of about 22 more states who have quickened their ratification. And by the end of 2023, don't be surprised that almost all 55 member states or 50 of them will ratify the African Continental Free Trade Area. Trust me.
Well, that's a very nice point. And I think the implementation or the operational phase was also launched in Accra.
Yes. Yeah, so we operationalized it in July 2020. And a number of protocols have actually been ratified and implemented. And currently this year, just yesterday, we have actually adopted 3 more protocols. Protocol on intellectual property, investment policy, and then competition policy. So we are on it.
Some countries are not just going equally with others when it comes to the operational phase or the implementation of this Continental Free Trade Area project. And what is your suggestion for those governments who would like just to join this in a faster rate?
I think initially, most of our governments were entertaining some doubts as to whether the AfCFTA will work. And so, particularly some businesses were not consulted, but especially the private sector. So those fears were there. But having participated in a number of meetings, particularly our trade ministers, the fears have been calmed. So we don't have much fears on that again. People are now able to understand that the African Continental Free Trade Area is one of the biggest opportunity that Africa can create for its citizens. And so we are very sure that member states having this background, they would quicken their processes.
And finally, what role can the private sector play in the implementation or the realization of the Continental Free Trade Area?
Yes, so if you look at the free trade area, it's actually targeting the private sector. So governments alone cannot work on it. We need free movement of people and goods to be able to realize the aspirations of the AfCFTA. We should at a point be able to move all products from the Ethiopian market into Accra without taxes. Or we should also be able to produce goods in Accra and move, whether it is Cairo, it is Johannesburg, it is Cape Town, or Addis Ababa. We should facilitate the movement of that. And I think that is one thing that the member states and the AfCFTA Secretariat are working on, to make sure that we liberalize the free movement of people and goods within the continent. This is the biggest challenge we have. Currently, that protocol on free movement of people and goods is not being ratified as we expect, but we hope that by close of 2023, some member states will join. In ECOWAS, we have the ECOWAS movement, free movement of people and goods. That's all ECOWAS member states have ratified. We also have SADC and East Africa that also have that arrangement. But we want to ensure that movement of people from ECOWAS to East Africa or to SADC or to North is still free. And then your goods can also transplant the boundaries of Africa with that challenge. And these are the things that we are moving on with.
Let me just give you a chance just to call for those private sector or other actors to immediately come to the implementation.
I think we have a number of private sector institutions that are already partnering with the African Continental Free Trade Area. And we think that now that governments are much interested in the operationalization and successful operations of the AfCFTA, the private sector need to join. We have the Afro-Asian Bank that is supporting some of the private sector institutions that need capital. African Development Bank is also supporting. We have the UNDP, we have the UNECA. They are all supporting private sector. And we have individual countries that also support. In Ghana, we have the Office of the President that is supporting the private sector that are interested in partnering with the AfCFTA to ensure that we have smooth operations within the continent. And so we would invite all the private sector, including individuals who want to have relationship with the AfCFTA, to contact the African Continental Free Trade Secretariat office in Accra for their business to go on. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
I really thank you so much for joining ETV Special Edition and just explaining about the Ghanaian experience of the operation or the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, and also for sharing your insights into the African 2023 economic outlook. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Nashiru Abdullahi.
Thank you so much too, and thank you to all your viewers for this opportunity. I wish them the best of the luck for 2023.
Dear viewers, this has been the conversation with Nashiru Abdullahi, Minister Counselor of the Ghana's Permanent Mission to the African Union, and also the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. Thank you so much for joining me again, and I'm Sindayot Amrat with this special edition. See you another time.